Hello, here we go. It's the Cop-Out Podcast.
What is happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Cop-Out Podcast, and episode one of, I'm going to call it a new show. It's episode one of pre-season press, and we're joined by Liverpool's correspondent for Goal. It's Neil Jones. Thanks again for jumping on, Neil. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Starting off a new series, yeah.
Well, I just thought with all this pre-season stuff that we've just been talking about before we started recording, I just thought let's just start a new show, pre-season press. Get you on the first one. You're the big dog around here, so we'll get you on the first one, innit? So
I'm a big dog around here, and it's like sort of square until that's in. Yeah, definitely.
No, but Neil, honestly, really appreciate it. But before we get stuck in, obviously, like I said, the pre-season stuff and all the stuff that's been flying around on Twitter, all the pictures and all kinds of stuff that we've all been loving seeing. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about like contract stuff before we get into that. So, I mean, obviously, last Friday, I think it was, Harvey Elliott signed a new deal. Yeah. And then there was also some news that came out of that looks like he's going to stick around this year rather than going back out on loan. So, I mean, I think that with this one, it's quite split. People wanted them to stay, half wanted them to stay, half wanted them maybe to go out on loan to a Championship side or Premier League side or whatever. But where do you stand on this one? Are you happy sticking around this year?
Well, first, I wouldn't say it's 100% that he'll be sticking around this year. I think there's a chance for him to show that he will be sticking around and should be sticking around. It's clear how highly he's rated. I mean, I think, to be honest, I was there the first game he played for Liverpool in pre-season. I think it was at Murrayfield against Napoli in Edinburgh, and he within about 20 seconds of being on the pitch, you saw exactly how good a player he's going to be. His first touch, he's just a bit special. He plays with his head up. He's got a picture of the game, and it's a really difficult balancing act Liverpool have got between obviously allowing that incredible talent, which it is an incredible talent. I mean, he's in the same age group as Jude Bellingham and Liam Delap and loads of those Villa lads who won the Youth Cup, and we're all very excited about seeing some of those players coming through. Louis Barry and Chukwuemeka Waker and all these players. He's probably Bellingham's top, and he's probably the second, in that list. So that's how good he is and how good he can be. And the tough thing for Liverpool is how do they get him to that level as quickly as possible, but without taking the risks that you would take by, i.e., playing him instead of Mo Salah in a Champions League semi-final or those kind of things. So it's a tough one. He had a good season last year at Blackburn, did really well. Numbers were good, but more importantly, the amount of minutes he played and the amount of games he played, and he played games back-to-back Saturday, Tuesday. I know he maybe tailed off a little bit towards the end of the season, but he played a lot of games, and that was really good for Liverpool. And I think what they want to see this pre-season is, what have you learned? What have you got better at? What's your level now after a year away? And if it's good enough, I think he will get a chance at Liverpool. If it isn't, or if there's a bit of doubt about it, and maybe they think, another season, he's still only 18, he's still so young, send him out again, try and find the right club for him, and hope he has another season like he had last year, probably at a higher level.
Yeah, because I mean, like you just said, I think it was 11 assists and 7 goals for not even a side that were pushing for promotion. Really, I think they started off well, Blackburn, but they kind of tailed off, didn't they, towards the end? But he was a big fixture in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, I did a chat with Stuart Downing. Would have been around sort of February, March time, and I asked him about him. Bear in mind, Stuart Downing, a left-footed player who's played on the right, and sort of would have been someone who I think would have taken a particular keen interest in him. And he said, just the amount of responsibility he takes within the team for a young lad. He comes in, he it's not like he's a 16, 17-year-old lad. He's like a first teamer, plays at a great level. As I say, plays with a game in mind. He doesn't just do sort of head down and run down the line and see what comes of it. Like a lot of young players do, especially a lot of young attacking wide players. He loves to connect. He loves to do the simple things. He loves to create and get into space. And yeah, I think he's got a huge future. I think I know a lot of people at Liverpool who think he's definitely going to be a Liverpool first teamer. I know how hard it'll be for him to do that, but when you hear people talk about him the way they do at Liverpool and outside, I don't think there's any doubt that he'll get chances to play for Liverpool's first team.
Yeah, I think he's just got that. I mean, we've had a lot of false dawns at Liverpool, haven't we, over the years, with certain players going, this player's going to make it, this player's going to make it, and ultimately they never. But with him, I think, like you said, you can tell straight away that, one, he's got the ability, but I think also he's got the mental strength to kind of not be fazed by occasions. And obviously coming into the squad, like Klopp gets to see what he's learned, like you said, and I think he's got the mental capabilities to kind of just get on with that and kind of just not be fazed by anything, which I think is, for someone of his age, is a huge asset, isn't it, to have that mental side of the game.
Most definitely. It's 2 years since he made, well, more than 2 years since he made his Premier League debut. You know, he's 18 in April. You know, incredible sort of rise that he's had, but he's never looked like a 16 or 17-year-old when I've seen him play. Obviously, you know, he attracts a bit of attention because his haircut's a little bit sort of out there, Andy, and you know, you can tell he likes himself, and he's got confidence in himself. He's got a bit of a swagger about him, and the way he plays doesn't probably marry up to that. You know, I think he's quite a simple player. He doesn't do spectacular things necessarily all the time, but I think, you know, when you look at young players who come in, and they do have ups and downs, and he will have ups and downs, obviously. But I think, like you say, I do think he does seem like he's got a pretty level temperament and character, and it does feel like you get a decent level of consistency out of him, even for someone who's a teenager still.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, speaking about me playing footy for a minute, I mean, a very tenuous link that I've got recently is I played footy with a lad who plays for Blackburn under 23s. And I'm 31 now, and I played against him, and he's fucking unbelievable. This lad, Sam Burns, his name is. And I just asked him, like, what would you get to train with him? How good is he? And he was saying he's just off the scale with how good he is. So I think that just puts into comparison just how talented he is at such a young age. And I think it's crazy how good he can be, but I think we need to maintain those expectations. I mean, like you said, the news that he might stay, obviously that might change depending on what goes on with. Obviously, we're going to come on to transfers and whatever else in a bit, and what Klopp wants to do. But he needs to show what he can do first and foremost, doesn't he? To kind of to get into this team.
Yeah, he does, and I mean, he needs to get the chances to do that as well, which is obviously going to be difficult with the position he plays and the player who plays in that position, and the fact that player Salah is available for the whole of pre-season as well. You know, he's not going to get that sort of 2 weeks before he comes back from a tournament or whatever it may be, but Liverpool have got a big squad out there. They've got, you know, a few games lined up, mini games and then proper games, and I think there'll be more to follow. So there's going to be opportunities for him to get on the pitch, and the way he plays, I think, will certainly it already has endeared him to Klopp, and it will endear him to his teammates as well. And I think he will find a place in that Liverpool squad, whether it's this summer or next summer. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, plenty of time. Like even if he does go back on loan, it's not the end of the world. He's got so much time, hasn't he, to get involved. So it's boss to even look forward to him and what he could be in the future. But I just wanted to ask you as well, in regards to other contracts. I mean, I don't know how reliable is the news on Twitter you read. You're like, is it true? Is it not? About Fabinho and Alisson maybe getting theirs sorted. Have you got any news for us on maybe when they'll get theirs sorted out?
No news, but yeah, it's true. I mean, they'll have to. I mean, they signed 2018, so 3 years are coming up now, so they'll play 5-year deals. They'll be in the last 2 now, so you will be looking at renewals. The same goes for Salah. The same goes for Mane. You know, when you get into those positions, I think the more interesting ones come. Van Dijk will be another one. The more interesting ones, I think, come with the likes of Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, and they're in a similar boat, aren't they? You know, and you're thinking, you know, I think Keita certainly will sign a new contract personally, but it's one of those where you maybe have to make a decision and you say, well, you know, is it time maybe to look and maybe move him on if he hasn't nailed down a place by the new year? Can you justify giving a pay rise, big new contract, for 5-year deal or whatever? But there's a lot of Liverpool players who are in that sort of boat at the moment, where they're in the last 2.5, 3 years of their contract, and that's when you see the movement. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you see a bit of a raft. If I think back to, probably would have been 2019, I think maybe would have been the raft, when maybe 2018, when you just got a sort of load of them at once, where you got Robertson, you got Alexander-Arnold, you got Salah, Mane, Firmino. I think Henderson signed a long contract as well. So I think you might see a little bit of that between now and Christmas, maybe, where you just see 4 or 5 first teamers, you know, penning new terms.
No, that's boss, isn't it? Because obviously we want those players tied down. Obviously, they're getting unfortunately for us, they're all getting to the wrong side of 30 at the moment, aren't they? So it is ideal to get them penned down and obviously then look to the future as well. And then obviously Harvey Elliott is going to be may come into that category in a couple more years. But Neil, let's get stuck into the pre-season stuff. Then all these pictures on Twitter of like all the lads in training, like Van Dijk and Gomez and Matip, and it's been honestly so refreshing, hasn't it, after the Euros, and obviously Trent didn't go and Hendo didn't play that much. It's just nice to see the lads back in training, hasn't it, and looking nice and refreshed and ready to go.
Yeah, and then some pretty good gear as well, isn't it? I like that. I like that training gear. It's decent in it. So yeah, and lovely backdrops and all that. So it's like, I think I'm almost thinking Liverpool have gone there just for the picture quality of, you know, the mountain in the background and all that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at 8 centre backs fit and available for selection at the moment. You know, it's just, we've never known anything like this, have we? And you think of some of the times last season when it was, people were scouring training pitches from Kirby and looking for one centre back that was going to play at the weekend, and now you've got the big man back. You've got Joe Gomez. I know they're not necessarily back to you know 100%, but they're not far off at all. They're joining in the sessions, and they're obviously very happy about that. Matip looks like he's pretty close, or sounds like he's pretty close from what Klopp was saying. Then you've got Konate, who, you know, I've got a sneaky suspicion he's going to be a big favourite of the Liverpool fans. He looks like he's someone who is absolutely delighted to be at the club, and I think he's gonna get a bit of a following, and hopefully his performances will justify that. And then you've still got Nat, you've still got Reece, you've still got Billy Cometio, you've still got the lesser spotted Ben Davies as well in the squad. So yeah, it's been good to see. It's always, you know, the Euros fills a gap, doesn't it? But for Liverpool or for club fans, it doesn't. It never really fills the gap, and you see now when the players come back, that's when you see the fans sort of starting to get that fresh excitement for it. Unless you're an Arsenal fan and you have to go and watch them play in Scotland and do what they did, which we saw last night. But yeah, from a Liverpool perspective, I think there's a lot of optimism swirling around, and you know that's only going to grow in the next few weeks when you get probably Jota, Robertson, Thiago, obviously Henderson, Alisson, Firmino, Fabinho later in the summer, probably going into August. But there's a lot of reasons to be cheerful at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Konate, he's just a man mountain, isn't he? Like you said, the mountains in the background. I was like, is Konate one of them? He's massive, isn't he? Like there was a photo where he's tackling Tsimikas, and Tsimikas looks like he's like an under 14s. Like he's just a beast. I honestly can't wait. And obviously with the fixtures coming up, obviously we've got FC Wacker on, or I'm probably absolutely butchering that name, on next Tuesday, 20th. Then we've got Mainz on 23rd of July, next Friday, and then we've got Hertha on the 29th, which is a Thursday. So there's plenty of games there, isn't it, for these lads to get a run out, and we can see what they're all about in the first team.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Wacker game, I think, and the Stuttgart, isn't it, the same day? They're playing two half-hour games, which will be interesting just to see sort of what the approach is. I guess that's down to the fact that it'll be a very intense training sort of week, and you'll see tired legs. And I think Liverpool have done that in the past, where you've watched games. I think probably last year was an example. I'm pretty sure they played Stuttgart and Salzburg, didn't they? I think the Stuttgart game, Klopp sort of said they've done well. You know, some of those players have done well to get through an hour because they're absolutely smoked after the week we've had with the training. So yeah, I think the big work will be done on the training field, and then we'll get chances to see how Konate settles in, how some of the younger lads step up. You know, it's a really great chance for some of those younger lads. You think of Cade Gordon and Musialowski and Conor Bradley, Owen Beck, who's another one who signed a new contract this week. You've got some of the lesser spotted, like I said, Ben Davies. You've got Loris Karius in the squad, incredibly. Taiwo Awoniyi, obviously first chance he's ever had to train with the first team in 6 years in the making. Incredible. You've got Marco Grujic still. So there's a lot of sort of points of interest, I think, in this squad. Not necessarily for the coming season, but in terms of potential transfers or loans, or even if it's just stepping up into the training group, you know, like the likes of Leighton Clarkson and Jake Kane have done in recent seasons. It'll be interesting to see which ones sort of put themselves at the front of the queue.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads. I think we'll come on to them in a bit, with like Grujic and Karius, and like just seeing him back in I mean, that was a bit of a mad one, isn't it? I mean, it just feels like should have been severed a long time ago, in my opinion, that one. But yeah, he's Yeah, bit of a mad one. But yeah, like you said, Klopp confirmed, I think it was yesterday, that Matip is the closest out of Van Dijk, Gomez and Trent to return to action. He also said that Van Dijk and Gomez will make a big step over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So with that being said, in your opinion, who do you think is the most realistic partnership for when we open up the Premier League season in 31 days' time?
So for the first game of the season, I think we're looking at Van Dijk and Gomez. Van Dijk and Konate. Sorry, I was completely Van Dijk and Konate. I think would be my guess, if you like. I think Van Dijk will get back. I think what Klopp meant by his big step is playing games. You know, I think that's what he means. I don't think it's sort of, they're obviously good enough to go training, but they don't want to load them too much. They don't want to have them in, double sessions like he mentioned. So the second session is a bit more of I imagine it'll be stretching or conditioning in terms of the muscles around the knee or the surrounding areas. So I think Van Dijk will be, personally, I think he'll be fit for the start of the season, providing there's no setbacks. And I think Liverpool will look to get Konate into the sides pretty early. But Matip's a hard one, and Gomez is a hard one because they're such good players, and when they're available, you think, how could you not pick Joel Matip? But then we're talking about Joel being the closest to be returning, but he's also probably the closest to being injured again, isn't he? Which is unfortunate for him. It's just the way it's been. So I think there's still a long way to go between that first game of the season. But yeah, if you were asking me on the spot, if everything went according to plan over the next month, I would say it'd be Van Dijk and Konate.
Boss, yeah, because I mean, I've got wrote down here. Maybe will it be Konate and Matip? Because I didn't obviously know whether Van Dijk. I mean, it all depends on how they train and everything, and how they react to injuries. But they all look really like Van Dijk looks just fresh as anything, doesn't he, in training? So I think you just don't want to get ahead of yourself, like I'm not. But then I'm also really excited to see him as well.
The thing is, as well as listen, out of those four, and Phillips, we'll put Phillips in the mix because he's done enough last season, I think, to show that if Nat Phillips has to start the first game of this season, I don't think there'll be too many people terrified of that prospect. But whatever the combination is, it should be a good combination, whether it's Konate and Gomez, Konate and Matip and Gomez, Van Dijk and Gomez. It will be two good centre-backs playing, hopefully anyway, providing, famous last words, providing there isn't some sort of absolute meltdown in the camp over the next month.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully not. Well, I think last year was probably our 5 years worth of bad luck into one season, wasn't it? So I'm hoping, fucking touch wood, that was the last of it. But yeah, Klopp also said that those featured in the Euros and the Copa America will be given 3 weeks off. So that's obviously Alisson, Fabinho, Hendo, Thiago, and Bobby. So he said 3 weeks. So that, my calculations, they'll be back the week commencing August the 2nd, which then gives them 2 weeks to get ready for Norwich.
Yeah, well, some of them will be back before then, obviously, in terms of like the ones who went out a bit earlier. So Robertson went out, he's probably 2 weeks into his, or close to 2 weeks into his holiday, so I expect to see him soon enough. Jota went out, was he quarterfinals, last 16? I think he went out, didn't he? Last 16, yeah. So, we should be seeing them before the end of August, and then we'll see them. Yeah, I think the ones who'll be closest maybe will be closest to struggling will be the Brazilian lads, and obviously I think Henderson, probably the fact that he's had so long out at the back end of last season, so he's done that base fitness work. He obviously didn't play. I think he played 150 odd minutes, I think, in the Euros, so he wasn't taxed the way that others were in those tournaments. So I think the Brazilian guys probably would be the ones that would be closest to being, or the last to return, if you like. But we've seen, if I think back to a year before last, I'm pretty sure Mane came back to training on the Monday and Liverpool played on the Friday against Norwich first game, and he was on the bench. So I don't think there's that much of a risk of Klopp leaving people out because they haven't had that time. I think he backs their general fitness and conditioning, and that he'll have them in and around the squad. But the good news is, hopefully, if everything goes again to plan, there isn't that need maybe to rush players into action. Should have options sufficient enough to cover and maybe use them like we did with Mane a couple of seasons ago off the bench.
Yeah, and I mean that's fed perfectly into me what I was just going to say next. Obviously, you said about Mane not really having a pre-season. I don't think he's really had a pre-season for years, has he? It feels like he's finished his international commitments, then he's back into the fold. So I think Klopp said Mane's had 5 weeks off. Salah's had 7. So that also is exciting, isn't it, to see how good they're going to be after a big break, and they've had like a bit of time to rewind and relax, and then obviously that coupled in with the fact that restrictions are going to end next Monday, and there's going to be fans in the stadium from the 19th onwards, then that's like double whammy, isn't it? That these players are going to be fresh, and there's also going to be fans in the stadium to cheer them on.
Definitely. And I think if you look back at last season, I think it's undeniable that I think players like Firmino in particular, I think would be one suffered as a result of fans not being in the stadium. And you think of Jota and Thiago, they haven't had it yet. They haven't had that experience. I know they had a couple of little in the middle of the season. Jota would have been there for the Wolves game, wouldn't he? I think when he was there and before he got injured. Thiago had the last game of the season. Pretty much that was all he got to experience with fans inside stadiums, and obviously Burnley away. But what a boost that'll be for those players to have that to come back. And like you say, with Salah and Mane, we're not used to having them at the first branch of pre-season, if you like. I think I was in America a few years back. I can remember probably 2018. Remember them joining up with the camp in the second part of that. I think it was in New Jersey, and they came on as a sub in the second half of a game there, and that was where they start in the middle of in the middle of the friendly fixture. So they're going to get pretty much 10 days of solid training, base level training, which is going to help them massively. And we know how good they are anyway, when they just hit the ground running. So it should only benefit those kind of players, certainly. And then you look at Van Dijk, Gomez, Konate, Matip, all the centre backs there are there. There's not really going to be too much mixing and matching in that regards. You've got Trent there. Robertson should be there in a time enough. So there's a good chunk of the first team there available for 75%, 80%, or 100% of the pre-season campaign, which can only bode well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's exciting times, when all those names you mentioned, and they're all getting at least a couple of weeks to kind of gel together, find out how each other work together, and obviously it gives Konate the biggest boost because he can work along all those first team defenders and kind of strike up a partnership ready for that game against Norwich. That's boss in itself. But talking about players that we've already got, I mean, I'm probably in the very small minority that don't really like transfer rumours. I mean, I do read them, but I'm just like, I'd rather just react when they've actually signed and whatever. But I know it's a big part of footy these days. So I mean, I want to ask you about a couple of them. I think the biggest one recently is Saul Niguez, isn't it, from Atletico Madrid? I mean, that one's been floating around for what feels like months now. I mean, and obviously I think they signed Rodrigo de Paul, didn't they, on Monday? So
yeah.
that already stoked what was already a very, very well lit fire. What are your thoughts on that one? Yeah,
look, I don't think he'll be joining Liverpool this summer. Say it there from the word go. Famous last words, but no, I don't think he's going to be coming to Liverpool personally. I know a colleague of mine, Ruben Aria, wrote, I think today in Goal, or yesterday certainly, that there's a good chance that there could be some sort of swap deal in the offing with Barcelona for Griezmann. And Barcelona absolute mess at the moment, aren't they? And nothing sort of gets, nothing's ruled out where they're concerned. Sal's a great player, really, really good player. Obviously, we've seen him in the Champions League over the last few years, played well against Liverpool, when he's played in recent seasons. So there's nothing at all against him as a player. I just think it's not the type of deal Liverpool are looking to do this summer. It's I think they'd be looking for probably a younger player. I think they'd be looking for a player who's probably less established, who's looking to build up a more Liverpool type sign. If you think about that, they sort of broke the mold last summer with Thiago, and that was their big one. That we don't usually see those type of signings from a top level club. 28, 29, 30-year-old player. I don't think they'll do it again with Saul. I think they'll look to buy someone a bit younger, a bit sort of more of a project, if you like. Not that I'm saying that's right, not that I'm saying that's wrong. I think that's the way they'll go. I have spoken to a few people around Liverpool, around Saul, actually, funny enough, and doesn't sound too promising for a Saul Niguez deal. So I wouldn't be getting his name on the back of my shirt, put it that way, at this time. But I would be very excited if I was proven wrong. Put it that way. Like between the end of August, if it came to me, this clip being played back to me and showed for me knowing absolutely nothing about anything, I'd still be quite happy because I'd love to see him in a Liverpool shirt. I'd love to see him in the Premier League. Full stop.
Yeah, I think that's it's win-win, isn't it? If that does happen, then it doesn't matter if you're wrong. That we've signed the best players.
Happy to be wrong.
Yeah.
I'll throw Mbappe and Haaland into the mix as well. Yeah, I'd love to be wrong about those two as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing in it. But I mean, there's a few other names. I mean, that I've got wrote down. So there's Yuri Tielemans, there's Renato Sanchez, there's Donyell Malen. There's probably hundreds more that I haven't mentioned. But I was just going to ask you, out of all the ones that you've potentially seen, who do you think could be the most likely as a player that we could sign, like a project type player?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, I'd be amazed if Liverpool don't sign a midfielder and a forward. If everything goes the way it should go this next few weeks, I think Liverpool will end the window with at least one midfielder and one forward, and I think that should be the aim. And I'd be disappointed in them if they didn't. I don't think Renato Sanchez is one. I spoke to someone sort of around the club who's described it as a deal that doesn't make sense really on any level with the cost and the fact that he doesn't go straight into the side and the sort of the profile of the player. I think he's a very good player, but I can sort of see where they're coming from on that one. I think Basuma from Brighton would make more sense in terms of the type of player. Maybe the issue there would be the level and the doubt over whether he could adapt to that level. And, I personally think he probably could, but it's Brighton to Liverpool is a big jump. So yeah, I look at that and I think I could see that one happening pretty well. Tielemans is a great player, by the way, but I can't see that the cost of getting the player out of Leicester now. We've seen with Maguire, we've seen with the fees being banded around for Maddison and whoever else. I don't think Liverpool are going to be doing that deal this summer personally. In terms of forwards, Malen was one actually. Yeah, that I wrote myself actually. I did a sort of a bit of a data dive into strikers that could sort of match up to Firmino, if you like, in terms of their profile, and Malen was on that list quite high up. The fee makes it attractive, I think, in terms of the type of player he is. I know he's had a few really good seasons at PSV Eindhoven. I know Dortmund have been linked quite strongly, but I think there was a sort of suggestion from Germany that maybe that wasn't gonna go as smoothly as they can. So it wouldn't be surprised me if someone like Donyell Malen was in the mix. So I would go probably towards those types of players. I think you can see the Liverpool players that they're after. Konate is a good example of it. He's 22. He's not played massive amounts of football over the last few years. I know he's played at a decent level. He's played in Europe. He's got potential to grow and to get better, and the fee is decent enough, but it's not world sort of level fee. So I think, and his wages are the same. So I think you're looking at players like that, to be honest. Neuhaus would be another one. I know he's been linked quite strongly with Liverpool at the start of the summer. He'd be another one. I think I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that move being rekindled or moved forward between now and the end of the window.
Yeah, I think it's just sometimes you get into like a black hole on Twitter and you're like, and you read so much stuff that you convince yourself that like an Mbappe is actually on the cards, but it doesn't fit, like you said, it doesn't fit the way that Liverpool do things. I mean, it could happen one day. It could happen where they just go, right, fuck the model. Let's just blow 100 million on someone. But it's going to be like you said, a type of a Malen or someone who we can kind of mold into what we need for future projects.
And I think the other thing to say is, I know I completely understand the desire and the impatience in some quarters for signings. You want signings, and when you see United signing Sancho, then it's almost like, well, we want one for ourselves, and of course that happens. But you have to remember, there's still. But people talk about replacing Wijnaldum. Well, Thiago has had half a season at Liverpool and was signed pretty much. I'm pretty sure part of the reason for them, deciding to change tack with Thiago was because of Wijnaldum's situation and a reconfiguration of the midfield. And ideally, I think the first choice midfield next season will be Fabinho, Henderson, and Thiago in that three. So there is that scope for the team to change. There's still Jota, who was brought in a pretty decent outlay and proved to be a good sign. But I think the thing to remember is, apart from really, if you look at it, probably Minamino would be the only one you could pick the bones out of Keita. There haven't been too many failures. So when Liverpool do get a player, you might not look at it and go, oh, that was the one I would have chosen, but they tend to get it right. I know Tsimikas probably another one that you were waiting to see what he's going to be like, but there's plenty of reasons to have faith in Liverpool's transfers. Certainly the type of players that they want to sign anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I asked if anyone they wanted to ask you any questions, and Yuki, obviously you just mentioned Minamino, but what are your thoughts on Taki then? Do you think that if the right offer comes in for him, that he will leave the summer?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the right offer will come in. Personally, I don't see anyone paying sort of 15-20 million pound for Minamino just because of he hasn't really done anything since he left Salzburg. As you know, he scored one Premier League goal for Liverpool. He had a half decent few games for Southampton, but he hasn't really. You know, Liverpool's thought when they signed him was that he was probably worth three times what they paid, which was 20 million plus. I don't think he's shown that he is. You know, I think he's got potential. I think he's got ability about him that I quite like. So I think probably it's in Liverpool's best interest to keep him around the squad and to use him, because he can play a few different positions. He seems to have a good attitude about him. He doesn't seem to be sort of high maintenance or that kind of thing. So I don't see a problem with Liverpool keeping him around the squad. But again, everything can change. You get a club that suddenly just they really, really want this guy and they want to put the money on the table. They've got some money from selling a player or whatever it may be. Or you get Liverpool suddenly land a target that they didn't think they were going to get, and then they've got this guy and you think, what, we need to get him out the door. So things can change, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minamino was still at Liverpool come the end of the transfer window. I think there's still probably a little bit of a desire from people within the club to just see, is there more in there for him? I have my doubts over whether there is, but I think he hasn't had that much of a chance. I don't think, he had a year at the club pretty much, which about 8 months of it was in lockdown, 6 months of it, more than that, 9 months of it was without supporters. He was not starting games. He was coming on League Cup games and that kind of thing. Liverpool were at the very top. They were at the very peak. So he joined the club they were winning every single game. Then he's playing in League Cup games and they're getting beat. And all of a sudden the stats coming out that, Minamino's made 4 starts and they've only won one of them and all those kind of things. So there's a lot of circumstances, I think, that feed into the fact that he probably hasn't had a fair enough crack at the whip yet.
Yeah, and Klopp, I think it was on today on the official website, Klopp said that if someone wants to leave, they can come and tell me about it and I'll have to think about it. Nobody's came so far, so obviously no rush from the players' side. And he went on to say that the market's really calm at the moment and let's see what happens. But in the moment, everybody has a chance to impress me and I hope they do. And that's just the Klopp way, isn't it? Like if someone wants to come in and like Harvey Elliott and a Minamino been out on loan, want to come back in and forge their way into the team, he's not going to be the type of person just to kind of view that negatively. He actively encourages that, doesn't he, to kind of come in and prove me wrong and come in and save me money, which I think is another gripe that Liverpool fans has, that he's saying it in that way because he's got no hopes of signing people and he wants to kind of G up the players that he's got to make them into more of a squad player than making a big outlay to get someone else in. I think that's Klopp is all over, isn't it? He wants to make the most of his squad. Yeah,
I mean, that's one of his famous sayings that he's repeated many, many times in press conferences. I prefer training to transfers. He always says that, doesn't he? Internal transfers. He talks about quite a lot, and promoting players from the youth team or bringing players back off loan. And listen, it's the proof's in the pudding, really. He doesn't generally bring players back from loan and then give them a chance. Nat Phillips is probably the one. Maybe Reece Williams was a lot younger than that when he went on loan. But yeah, Nat Phillips is probably the only one, isn't he, I can think of him. You might prove me wrong on this, but I'm sure he's the only one who's played many, many games for Liverpool, having been out on loan the previous year or haven't looked like he was on his way out the door. Generally, if you go on loan, it's the first step towards getting you out of the door permanently. But these are times have changed, and you look at that England squad. I was having a chat with this about someone recently. Look at that England squad, and how many of those players had loan spells somewhere earlier in the career. You know, Harry Kane being probably the best example, but Pickford went everywhere. Harry Maguire played lower leagues. You've got Trippier had been on loan. Kyle Walker. So many of those players had to go and, you know, step down to step back up, and I think there's still opportunities for some of those Liverpool players. I'm not sure many of them will, but I think Elliott will probably be one who might break the mold in that regard. Phillips already has. You never know. Maybe Minamino. Maybe he might.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'd all be made up, wouldn't we, if he did go and prove us wrong.
Look, remember how? I mean, I think that's another thing to say about, you know, fans of transfers, or sorry, I say fans of transfers, fans and transfers. Do you remember how exciting it was when Minamino was signing for Liverpool? Because we'd watched them play for Salzburg, and I mean, I remember the 4-3 game and people coming away saying, "Who was that guy?" You know, playing for them. I mean, it was him. It was him, Haaland, and Hwang, who ended up going to Leipzig, and it was those three. Wow, these players are unbelievable. You know, like, and then you find out, oh, we're getting them for 7 million, and then almost because he didn't hit the ground running straight away, it becomes that was just a cheap pickup. You know, like a no mark signing, but really, you know, could. In a different circumstance, if he comes in and sort of just has a real good, you know, start to his Liverpool career, that's all of a sudden become this incredible sort of purchase. So there's still enough. I think there's still a bit of potential in there. I'm not 100% convinced he becomes a star for Liverpool, or even a regular starter, but I think it's probably a little bit premature to say he never will, because I think the chances he's had have been in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, perfectly said. I think he's had no fans in stadiums. I think when you think of Liverpool, you do think of playing in front of the Kop and having a full stadium and that 12th man support, and he hasn't had the opportunity to have that yet. And obviously, then he was sent out on loan, so he could come back and be a different player, couldn't he?
That's the first thing the club website will do when they do an interview with a new player. The last question probably is usually, "Have you got a message for Liverpool supporters?" And they usually say, "I can't wait to be out there and hear You'll Never Walk Alone and stand out at Anfield. It's going to be a special moment for me." They all talk about that. Well, these new signings, Tsimikas, Jota, Thiago, you know, even some of the younger lads, they haven't really had the chance to experience that. So the sooner they do, the better.
Yeah, definitely. But Neil, I just want to ask you about some of the other, obviously, Klopp saying that no one's came to him yet asking him to leave, but there is a few question marks over the likes of Divock Origi and Xherdan Shaqiri, Harry Wilson, and then Grujic as well, you touched on before. What are your thoughts on those four players, and then any of the other ones that might be leaving? Who do you think is most likely to leave in the coming weeks?
Wilson, Grujic, pretty much 100% will be leaving. I think I'd be amazed if either of those two are in and around the Liverpool squad, you know, by the end of the window. I would expect, if you were asking me, I'd say one of the three, Minamino, Origi, and Shaqiri, will leave. I don't think all three will. Maybe two, but I think that would depend on a very good offer. Personally, I think Origi needs to leave. I think for him and for the club as well, I think you need to that needs severing and just sort of thank you for everything, and away you go and enjoy your career. You know, he's pretty much had what I know he's had those incredible moments in the 18-19 season. He had a few 19-20. He's picked up his medals, but he's pretty much had 3 seasons there where he's not really started games. He's not really played games, and for the age that he is and for the quality that he's got, and he's a very good forward, Divock Origi. You know, it's easy to forget because we see him for 15 minutes in games when we're chasing games, or we see him playing in a much changed team in the League Cup, and he doesn't look like, you know, Bobby Firmino or Salah or whoever. But he's a very good player, and I think it's time that he went and showed just how good he can be as you know, a starter, a regular starter somewhere else. He's not going to get that chance at Liverpool. He knows he's not. There were times last season when Liverpool didn't even turn to him when they were struggling to you know, put a win together. So I don't think he's necessarily going to get more chances next season. I think possibly the only thing that might count in his favour is the AFCON and the situation there with Salah and Mane. But even that's diluted a little bit by it won't be quite as damaging because of the winter break and the way things work out. So yeah, I think Origi's pretty likely to leave, and I think he might be the one that has the greatest well, the greatest market, if you like, in terms of clubs interested. I think there will be people who take Divock Origi, certainly. Shaqiri, a tough one, isn't it? I really like Shaqiri. I think he's a very good player. And then you look and you sort of say, well, Elliott, we've been talking about Elliott earlier in the show. They're probably going for the same place in the squad, really, aren't they? And Elliott's younger and, potentially a bit fresher. And then, you've got, Nico Williams is another one, isn't he? We didn't mention him, but there are a lot of suggestions, and I think Liverpool would be willing to sell him this summer, which surprised me a little bit, but maybe they see as a money-raising option. He might be one as well that you keep your eye on to see whether he gets himself a move before the end of the window. And then there's Nat. I think he'll have offers as well over the summer. I think there'll be Premier League clubs coming in and making offers for Nat Phillips. So there's probably 5 or 6 4 or 5 certainties and 2 or 3 probables, I think, from the Liverpool squad. And the certainties are the likes of Ojo, Wilson, Grujic, Karius, probably a Awoniyi as well would be in that mix. The probables are probably Origi, Shaqiri, Williams, Phillips.
Yeah, obviously Karius as well. I haven't got this one down, but since we mentioned him, there's been a bit of I wouldn't say a clamouring on Twitter. I think it was just people trying to generate a bit of a debate around obviously seeing him in training again and seeing him with the other keepers. But yeah, he's definitely. There's people saying he needs to stay and be integrated back into the squad, and I'm just like, there's absolutely no need or no way for that, is there?
No, there isn't. He was there last summer. People forget that. He was in Salzburg last summer with the squad and trained and was pictured. And I'm pretty sure the same debate was probably reopened again. He went to Union Berlin on loan, which was seen as a perfect move. He's got girlfriend's family from Berlin, and it looked like it was going to be the sort of, if you were box ticking, you'd say, oh, perfect. Not great, not massive expectations, a decent crowd, sort of in that nice club. Play a certain way, have a decent sort of atmosphere around the club. And he barely played. He played 4 Bundesliga games. He was left out with a 34-year-old, played ahead of them the whole season. They did really well without him. They qualified for the Conference League. I think they qualified for the new Conference League. And he's come back and he's got a year left on his contract, and Liverpool are just trying to, he and Liverpool are just trying to find somewhere for him to go, and it's sad. It is sad because he will always be defined by that one game, and it's listen, whatever you do in life, whatever job you do, if you were defined by the worst moments of your working life, if that was what everyone remembers you for, it's not nice, is it? And there will never be. There's no surprise that Liverpool don't post pictures of him. Liverpool don't post a picture saying, "Oh, welcome back, Loris," because they know what will come underneath. They know what will be said. He doesn't really post too much. It's not like he's saying, "Right, back to work," here we go, red men and that kind of stuff, because he knows what's going to come. And it's sad, but from his perspective, from Liverpool's perspective, like I think you said at the top of the show, it probably should have ended before now. I think it absolutely will end this summer, one way or the other. Whether he gets loaned out for the last year of his contract or whether he gets a permanent move remains to be seen. But I think he needs it. Liverpool needs it. And yeah, I would probably not. I'd not start thinking about that idea of him being in the squad, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, like you said, it is a shame the way that he is going to be remembered. Unless he goes to another big club and does good things there, then he's always going to be defined by that horrible moment where we all had big hopes for him, so it's not like he was faced with animosity from the offset. We all had high hopes that he was going to come in and be a good keeper for us, but it just mentally probably weren't as strong as you need a Liverpool goalie to be at the time, which is unfortunate, isn't it?
I always think about this with probably he had too much expectation as well, because if you think about Alisson was 70 million and came in, and so you can have that expectation. Karius was £4 million from Mainz. He'd done nothing in his career in the top level sense. He was a gamble from Liverpool. He was sort of, we think he's a good keeper, let's see how good he can be. So it wasn't like Liverpool were expecting him, or we should have been expecting him to be the world's best goalkeeper. But obviously, he was sort of okay and average, and then he had the moments in Kiev, or the 2 moments in Kiev, which sadly will always define him, whatever the reason behind it. And you can, you look at the reaction to the story that came out after it about the concussion, and there wasn't a great deal of sympathy, I'd say, from Liverpool or outside of Liverpool, which is a bit sad to sort of to reflect on. But it does say a little bit about where his career is at with Liverpool. He doesn't have one, unfortunately, and he didn't have one pretty much from that day in Kiev, and certainly not from the second game back with Tranmere, when it became clear from that game really that I don't think his mind was going to get back onto it to the level that Liverpool needed, and a break was needed.
Yeah, it is. It's very unfortunate. But Neil, one more before we I'll let you go is, I mean, we've touched on Ben Davies, but I mean, there's obviously Nat Phillips is going to get loads of offers for how good he was at the back end of last year. He was absolutely unbelievable, to be honest with you. But Ben Davies hasn't had an opportunity, and obviously we touched on earlier about the upcoming friendly games. Do you expect him to be involved in them at all?
Yeah, surely. I mean, to be honest, I spoke to people at the back end of last season, and it's funny how things work out, because there was a lot of conversations I had with people, and different people as well, who said, he's close, Ben Davies, he's close, and there's a sort of, I wouldn't say there was a clamour, but there was a suggestion that, what, he might be, this might be the right time to give him his go. And for whatever reason, I mean, I think he had an illness at one stage. He had a calf problem, I think, that recurred a couple of times, so that stopped him from basically being in the squad a couple of times when he might well have started, never mind being in the squad. So I think by the time he sort of got himself to a position where he was ready, Kabak was settled, and then obviously Reece Williams came in towards the back end. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a good chance. Let's say the 30-minute games. Let's assume Van Dijk and Gomez don't play in those 30-minute games. Was that next Tuesday? Is it? I think it is. Let's assume they don't play in those games. Okay, Ben Davies. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him play one of them. Let's say, wouldn't be surprised to see him get half an hour in the first friendly off the bench. When there's a lot of changes, and he deserves it, doesn't he? Because he's walked. He's left his boyhood club, in the middle of the season when they were doing okay. I know they tailed off quite a bit, but he's left his club. He's had this dream move, this great story that everyone's talked about. He had this good wave of goodwill from all his former teammates and coaches who we spoke to and said, he's a great lad and he's going to do this. And then everyone sort of, because Liverpool do well without him, he becomes this sort of figure of fun that, like, Ben Davies is, he's just sort of there as a cheerleader or whatever it may be. But he obviously can play football. He can obviously play to a level. So let's see what it's about this pre-season, and if he can stay fit and keep himself training well and keep himself, focused and doing all the right things, which I'm pretty sure he does, because I've heard that he's a pretty good lad around the place. He's not some sort of ego knocking around. Then let's see what he can do in a friendly game, and that's what pre-season's for, isn't it? To give people chances, and whether it's a shot window or whether it's a little bit of a window into getting into Liverpool's squad, I hope he gets his opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's just we want to just see him play, don't we? Like you said, if he, like last year, he had a few issues where he was close and it didn't happen, whatever. But we just want to see him pull on the shirt and just see what he's like, because I don't think, most of us don't know. I mean, unless you're watching Preston or whatever else, you won't know what he's about. And I mean, there's a lot of Preston fans that I seen on Twitter that were saying he's a good player and whatever, and he'll do well at a higher club, but he just doesn't have that opportunity. And when he gets that opportunity, then he might. I mean, there's a lot of centre backs now, so it's going to be difficult for him to forge his way into that reckoning. But if he wants to stick around and be a squad player for the cup tournaments, then if he can prove in this pre-season he's good enough, then that's all the more better for us, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's a left footer. He's got a lot of league experience under his belt. He's a good passer of the ball playing centre back at championship level certainly, and football league level. So can be something a bit different. You got to give a bit of balance, with having a left-sided centre back. I've heard he has played at left back. I probably don't expect him to play at left back for Liverpool, but in an emergency. So yeah, there are some upsides to him. Obviously, he's not. I'm guessing he's not on mega money. He's not sort of one of those who's going to be knocking on Klopp's door saying, "Listen, what is going on here? How's this Virgil fella playing instead of me?" But I think, there's an upside to him that we haven't seen yet, and I would like, at the very least, listen, I'm pretty sure he'd say the same. If he's going to fail at Liverpool, at least put it on his shoulders and have it that, you know, you had your chance, you just weren't at the level, sorry, you know, shake hands and off you go, rather than it just being this sort of what if, and, you know, I never got a chance, I never got to even put a Liverpool shirt on. I think he'd like to have the opportunity at least to dig his own grave rather than have it dug for him.
Yeah, definitely. But Neil, yeah, that's been Boss. Thanks so much for jumping on. We'll leave it there, and I'll let you crack on with your day. But thanks again for your time. It's been, I love that. Yeah, thanks again for Neil jumping on. Nice one to everyone for watching. Drop us a like on the video, and give us a little comment about your thoughts on who we should sign and how good Virgil looked in his kit and on the bike with Mo and whatever else. And if you haven't subscribed already, please go and do that. I think we're like 30 off our first big milestone, which is 1,000 subscribers. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's not massive, but that's pretty good. We only started last year, so if you could give us a subscribe, that would be Boss. Yeah, nice one, everyone. Thanks again to Neil, and we'll see you all in a bit.